All right. That's kind of a different thing to have happen. And, you know, 100,000 years from now, when people look back at this geological era and they wonder what happened, it'll look like a comet hit the planet or something. It'll be something happened and released all this 100-million-year-old carbon. All right. Well, the biologists tell us that if we're looking at a 550 part per million scenario, we're looking at half the species on the planet committed to extinction. 100,000 years from now in the fossil record, it'll look like a comet hit the planet. All right? Not really something we ought to choose to do, I don't think. All right. You think, well, that's news. Is that news?
It's
well,
news.
Here's something that I think is a bit surprising. In 1896, one of the most famous chemists that the world has ever known, Arrhenius, wrote a paper in which he said, you know what, the way that we're burning coal now, we're going to change the climate of the planet. 1896. A very famous scientist pointed out a bit of a problem. And the CO2 level at that point was 286 part per million. 1984. There was a convention of scientists, and they said, well, look, it looks like that the systems on the planet are self-regulating, that we have this carbon cycle, and there are things that can take up carbon and things that you know, will balance this out. And so there was an idea that, okay, this thing that we've been worried about for a long time, maybe it'll take care of itself. Okay? 1958, they set up those measurements on, in Hawaii, the first continuous real-time measurements of CO2. Instrumentation came along and that you could actually measure the atmospheric CO2. And then in 1976, they found out that methane and these NOx emissions, which you get from burning fossil fuels at high temperatures, were also contributing to global warming. In 1985, the International Union of Scientists said, all right, global warming is inevitable at this point. What we've already done to the atmosphere is going to change the planet in a way that's going to change the climate. 1985. 1990, 49 Nobel Prize-winning scientists put together an appeal to humanity to stop putting so much CO2 into the air. 352 parts per million. 2007, the IPCC fourth report comes out and says, this is a huge problem. All right? There are so many scientists watching species go extinct right now. The logbook is getting big. We're not talking about warnings anymore. We're talking about body counts. All right, there's just not really any debate about this, and it's not news. It's not new. It's old. But it doesn't sell any cars. All right, an unstable climate is a big problem. If you think about farming, farming requires that you understand the climate, the precipitation, and the soil conditions of the place you're in. We're not going to change the hours of sunshine that we get by changing the chemistry of the atmosphere, but we are going to change precipitation. We're going to change temperature at different times of the year, and that's going to mean that different plants will grow differently, and we won't know what that's going to be from year to year, and that's the problem. All right, not to mention storm severity. That's going to be a problem that's going to be with us for a long time. All right, well, if I think the engineering role in this, I mean, really, the internal combustion engine, that's one of the best pieces of engineering. That's really clever. And I'm sure that the people who came up with that weren't thinking, how can we change the chemical composition of the atmosphere in a way that will really make this a fun ride? I'm sure they weren't thinking that. So, you know, if I'm an engineering researcher and I'm thinking about a big problem to work on, well, I think there's two things to work on here. One of them is adaptation. I asked, why did you get why I put up a picture called Armageddon when we talk about having to use a little bit less fuel? Well, it's because we don't have an adaptive method to deal with that. We don't have a way built into our system that allows us to just do that. That's a problem. The other problem is that the system that we have built based on the assumption of continuous growth of resources was based on a false assumption. We have to change the assumption and see how that changes the design. So I'll give you two examples now, one of this kind of engineering and one of that kind of engineering. All right, the first one is a fuel retail management system. Fuel retail management, a retail management system. That seems pretty unexciting. You thought I was going to say fuel cells, didn't you? You'd be wrong. Oh, just for the record, since I'm on video, hydrogen economy is a story, okay? It's not any kind of a factual thing, okay? It's a story. So don't count on it. Biofuels are also a story, okay? They're an idea, but they're not something that's going to ever replace fossil fuel. Are we really going to ask the biosphere of this planet to crank out 150 times what it's already producing for us so that we can drive happily without thinking about it? I don't think so. That's not going to happen. We're going to change. We're going to adapt, and we're going to change. One way we're going to adapt is to have a simple market system that allocates a resource. All right, what is that like? Okay, I was on a completely full plane coming here. It was completely full. How in the world does Air New Zealand manage not having protests and the end of the world? Because if that plane's completely full, somebody got told no. Somebody else had to have wanted to get on that plane, and they got told no. There's not a seat. Guess what? We can handle that. It's not knowing that we can't handle. If there's a way that I can get information about what's available to me and I can make choices about what I want to spend and what I want to do, then I just deal with it. And the problem is that we don't have information about how much fuel there is and where it is and what it's going to cost. You think about it, 10% fuel shortage is what sent the UK into spasms. I mean, $2 billion worth of damage, they reckon, because of there was a strike in 2000, which caused about a 10% reduction in fuel availability in a certain area of England. And it caused mayhem. Why? Because of the behavioral response to that. Oh my God, there might not be fuel. And so people did a run on the fuel stations. They went crazy. It was all a disaster. All right, and it only lasted a week, and it cost their economy, they think, $2 billion. What kind of madness is that? 10% less fuel. All right, so what we actually need, that kind of madness, if I think about it, is something like, let's say U2 says they're going to come to Auckland and give a concert. But they don't say anything about how you get tickets. Yeah, just come. Yeah, just come. No information about what it costs. No information about how you're going to get a ticket, whether or not you're going to get in. Just come. I think we might have some mayhem, right? If you have a system where the market assumes that there's more to be supplied than what the people want, then that works fine if that's true. If it's not true, you have mayhem. All right. So all we need actually is a retail system. And this we've actually designed and tested, and we're now working with Jade software to build the system. And it's actually quite a simple thing. It's an awful lot like airline reservation, that you just need, you have your account, kind of like your text account or your internet gigabytes account. You have fuel, but as a country we're going to use less. And what that means is that there's a certain amount of fuel that you can get, and then more of it's going to be more expensive. And it'll get more and more expensive. And if you use less, you actually will get rebates. So if you move yourself into a lower consumer category, you'll be paying less for your fuel than somebody who's a high user, etc. It's just sort of normal retail thinking is the way to essentially deal with this issue so that we don't